Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, and with me is my expert panel, as always, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. How are you guys?
Stressed.
Good.
Wonderful.
We got mixed reactions here, right? Jessica, what's happening?
What's happening?
What's going on?
Not too much. Got what do I have going on? Got exams going on. LSAT stuff. Crying. You know, the usual.
Fair. Sam?
I'm same, stressed with school, final projects, exams, but I'm excited for this show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Amara?
Same. Finals, essays.
Yeah.
I'm really glad for the semester to be over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a crazy time. Yeah, I got a Spanish midterm today, so I'm trying to keep my cool about that because Spanish 101, so I'm learning the language from scratch, right? So,
Bueno.
gracias. Es grande problema, right? For me, at least, in Spanish. But to begin, all opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. Just a reminder to everybody watching, you can comment on our feed anytime during the show, even during our weekly update, which is what we're going to talk about now. We're going to start with something that shouldn't be happening, but apparently in 2019 it is. Somebody has hurled feces in 3 separate instances at Toronto University. So twice at U of T and once at York. They've identified the victim on a security camera. I don't even know. I don't have the words to understand what the motivations would be for somebody like that.
He must have like some sort of mental illness. But yeah, I think it's awful. Like, it's funny.
It's not funny.
Okay, it seems funny because it's human waste, but it's funny because it's so absurd. I think that's what it is. Like, it's absolutely absurd to think you could be like in the library and somebody will just dump a bucket of
To my knowledge,
human waste
it
on
was
you.
pee-pee and poo-poo. And I think there's a video of it, actually. I think at York University
that.
specifically.
I thought the
there's a
video
video
was
of
very
the
liquid.
aftermath.
Yeah, the aftermath.
Yeah, that was the pee-pee. That was the liquid.
Yeah,
But it was also white, so was it not bird? Bird?
No, I don't.
No.
Oh,
No.
I saw like
Human.
what? Oh,
It was, yeah.
Where's
Anyway.
she getting it? That's another question. Why do you have 3 buckets full of waste
It's a connoisseur of sorts.
of
Well,
shit
the theory I heard was because he was wearing a construction helmet,
he
at
was
least one of those
collecting.
times
that makes sense.
from
If he was
porta potties?
Yeah.
That's even worse.
That is such... One, it's pure assault. 2, the health repercussions behind that and ramifications, horrible. Somebody can get incredibly sick. You know, if he could get criminal. He will get criminal damages for this because, you know, even if you're working in the medical field and you're careless and you know you infect somebody somehow. I mean, that's malpractice, but still, you could be potentially infecting a lot of people this
And
way.
feces is dangerous.
It is. So yeah, no,
really
he would
have that
definitely
on
get
you.
a criminal offense because it's assault.
And I feel
it's
like-
pure assault with intent.
Everyone's, you know, he did it at York and U of T, so everyone here thinks that Ryerson will be next. And
Yeah.
it's just like,
Okay, Ryerson
makes me
has enough
nervous.
problems over here.
Yeah,
we already
I
have the
think we've
smell
dealt
of
with
Gould
enough.
Street. We don't need more.
the safe injection
I've seen
site
it-
characters.
I've seen enough feces on the ground around campus. I don't want to see it flying in the air.
you've seen it
you
on
hope
the
it's
ground?
not on you.
Yep, but in front of the bookstore.
Whoa!
And someone almost stepped in it.
Didn't know
Almost
this was
stepped
San
in it.
Francisco, but
It's getting there.
San Francisco. Do you want to tell?
San Francisco has a problem with fecal matter, and there's a famous poop map, and where you can go and see the reported cases of public defecation.
Well, I've been there a few times and never seen that once.
Yeah, I didn't notice it either when I was there. But
Well, they're
I
very
mean-
vigilant, which is why they
Cleaning
have
up
the
the
poop map.
shit.
Okay, well, let's move on to some more concerning news, but less disgusting. CN Rail about 2,000 workers were on strike, but they've just reached a tentative deal. And what's interesting, I saw a meme, and it basically said, you know what doesn't strike? Pipelines. So, Amara, you're rolling your eyes. Why is that?
I don't like. What is that supposed to mean?
You don't like pipelines, right?
No.
That's why. Well, obviously, one of the biggest manure, I believe, manufacturers, they said that they're going to stop using CN Rail because of this strike. What other repercussions are there from this strike? Even though it's finally been a tentative deal has been reached, not even a final deal, a tentative one. What is going to happen after this? Do you think they're going to have they're going to quickly resolve it with a final resolution, or are they going to strike again? Are we going to see more companies pull their stock from using CN Rail?
Well, I think if there's definitely that volatility with I believe they're unionized, right? I mean, that would make sense. They're striking. Then I guess you could see that the volume of the shipments that go across CN Rail would decrease. And I think this was especially concerning for people in Quebec because they had a shortage of propane due to this strike specifically. And I saw that a bunch of farmers, or not farmers, I think they were just residents in rural Quebec, had thrown corn or grain onto Trudeau's, I guess, his office in Papineau, his riding. And I guess that's to show that the point of it was that they were running out of propane. He'd like that the federal government stepped in and resolved the strike. So I guess it worked, but you could tell the people in that video were very, very angry. And they were even like kind of throwing the corn into journalists' face. Like they were just discontent.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it's not the first time that a unionized people have striked. We're looking at having potentially another teacher strike coming up. The Ford government is trying to suppress that and trying to come up with a resolution. But before we go to our final weekly update, I just want to mention that this is a big day for the Raben Report because it is our 70th episode.
Wow.
You know? So, yeah, it's a big day, and I'm incredibly humbled and proud of all of the past and current Raben Report panelists for your hard work in creating civilized and educational debates. Thank you all for being a part of our 7th season. It's truly amazing to have you guys. And just to show everybody that I'm not lying, this binder right here, I don't know if you can see, contains every single show since our first episode. Now, you won't find our first and second ever episodes because they weren't saved because of technology.
You know what the RTA slogan is? If it's not saved twice, it's not saved at all. So
that's fair. I was also new, and they didn't teach me how to save it twice, so or in 2 different places. So anyway, you can find all the episodes except those 2 on our Facebook page if you want to take a look at the journey we've had. But yeah, in here, episode 1, you can see. So I'm just very happy that we've lasted this long because we are probably one of the most controversial shows at Ryerson, but we've managed to stick it out. But finally, let's talk about our final weekly update, which was the protest at York University. The protest was organized against former Israeli soldiers coming to speak at Ryerson through a Jewish organization, but what it really was a protest to intimidate Jewish students, and it shows that they're not welcome on campus. You know, it's honestly a cover for anti-Semitism. I know you don't believe that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, Amara, but when people come to a protest and they talk about free Palestine, and then they go, and I quote, "Intifada, Intifada, go back to the ovens."
I have thoughts. Do you want me to talk? Or
yeah, but
and I'm just so you know, just so Amara is not singled out here, I'm with her. I don't think anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism, or anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
It's a cover. It's a cover. Do you? Well, the statement "Intifada, Intifada, go back to the ovens." What do you make of that?
So I saw this. I go on Reddit a lot, so I saw it on like York's Reddit subreddit when it happened, the protest, and I've looked through a lot of articles and a lot of accounts of students who were there, and I haven't found any video or anybody saying they heard that. I think obviously, like, it doesn't even really need to be said that that's anti-Semitic and disgusting.
I think it does need to be said, though.
Well,
because if you ignore it, then
so
it's
I
going to
don't think
persist.
that anybody needs to say that saying "go back to the ovens" is anti-Semitic. Like, I think it should be obvious, is what I'm saying.
But it's not.
But I haven't found any evidence of that actually being chanted at the protest. And I think having a highly political event like that on campus, on a public campus, is not necessarily the best idea. Regardless of what you think about the actual conflict, we can all acknowledge that it's highly political and people get very passionate on both sides. And I don't think that a public university was the right place to hold that event, especially with like Israeli defense for like ex-Israeli soldiers.
Public university in its core is a place to learn. And if you can't have civilized debates or not, there's nothing wrong with protesting. But when you protest and attack Jewish students, which happened.
Well, from what I've read, the violence came from both sides. And it wasn't like
it was
university
retaliation.
security.
So the JDL, Jewish Defense League, they were there and they counter-protested, but the violence started with the protest and Jewish students were attacked. They were intimidated. I have friends who were there on that night and they said that they've never seen that sort of anti-Semitism ever at York University, and Doug Ford has condemned it. John Tory has condemned it. Prime Minister
they're
Justin
condemning
Trudeau.
violence.
No,
That
they're
doesn't
condemning
mean-
anti-Semitism.
Well, of course they're condemning anti-Semitism.
Because it was anti-Semitism.
I don't think it was.
You don't think intifada go back to the... Do you know what an intifada is?
Yes, I do.
You
And
do?
there
So it's a
was-
day of rage where in the late 90s and the early 2000s, terrorists came to Israel and blew up buses, businesses, and killed innocent people in a day of rage. That's an
I
intifada.
don't believe that terrorism is okay. I do believe that Palestinians have the right to act in their own national interests as well.
Is that violence?
And
is that terrorism?
I don't think that...
Intifada is the way to do
again,
it?
Let her
there's-
talk.
Thanks.
Hold on. Just
There's no evidence that go back to the ovens was
Yeah.
said. So, of course, it's anti-Semitic.
I have read 3 sources that have said that and personal accounts that have said that.
I've
So,
read both that say the opposite. So,
okay. Well, you're not really addressing the fact that it's an anti-Semitic statement. You're saying, well, it wasn't said, so it doesn't matter. But
I just said before that nobody needs to acknowledge that it's anti-Semitic because it,
But
like,
people
not
do need to acknowledge it.
It's obviously anti-Semitic. I don't think anybody would argue that like telling Jews that they basically need to like endure the Holocaust again is not anti-Semitic. Like
That's an intifada, basically.
And it's not.
It
in
is.
an educated conversation, nobody's going to, in an educated conversation with good people that aren't racist, nobody's going to, fight for, say the Holocaust was a good thing. It obviously was, and it was obviously racism. But I believe that the Israel-Palestine issue is highly political, and it's not as black and white as like Jews or hate Jews. I don't think that's
No,
it. Because
it's definitely not
Palestinians
black and white. But
exist
the
as
problem
well.
is when you go to a protest and you say that it's anti-Israel and then you shout, go back to the ovens,
Again,
you're
there's no
referencing the
evidence
Holocaust.
that was said.
There is evidence that it was
Well,
said.
I've read evidence.
Regardless
So have I.
if it was said or if it was not. If it was said, yeah, it's pretty horrible. If it wasn't said,
It's anti-Semitism.
good thing that it wasn't.
Everyone said that it's
Everybody-
anti-Semitism.
Of course that's anti-Semitic. Nobody is denying here, Elliot, that that's not anti-Semitic. If that was said, yeah, horrible, anti-Semitic. If it wasn't said, thank God, because that's anti-Semitic. Regardless of, if that happened or if that's not, the bigger issue at hand is that there were 2 very opposing political groups and they got into a very non-peaceful protest. Everybody is allowed and everybody's entitled to have their own positions on certain things, whether if you're pro-Israel, you're pro-Palestine. Both those parties are allowed to be there. Pro-Palestine people are allowed to feel that, Israel shouldn't be there and
Israel shouldn't be there. It should exist.
No, not that, but they shouldn't, be coming into their section of the land.
It's a highly political
It's incredibly
issue.
political.
It's not easy
It's
to
not
just
summarize in one sentence.
It's not just saying that, like, no, it's not, just saying that because it's gone on for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not just one thing of like, this is the situation that we're at now, and one party shouldn't be there and one party should, and it's. If you're Jewish, then you have to be pro-Israel, because I know some
That's
Jewish
not how it
individuals and they're not pro-Israel.
They're not
So-
they
and
wouldn't
to
be
say-
pro-Israeli government, but they're pro-Israel.
You
Not
can't
the
say that for
individuals that
people
I
you
know.
haven't met. You don't know
Well,
what all
you-
Jews think.
Not every
you bring
Jewish
up the
person
fact
is
that-
going to have this. Listen,
the same
Elliot, not
opinion.
every
Okay.
Jewish person is going to have the exact
Yeah.
same opinion that you will have. Not
Obviously.
every individual is going to have the exact same opinion that you have. And to say that if somebody disagrees with what you are saying and to throw out the race card, it's fear mongering. Because
Really?
somebody, yes,
And it
because
has
Really?
somebody-
Hold on.
No, let me finish.
Hold on.
If you come after
because
me
you're
and if you say,
because you're going to accuse me of fear mongering by bringing the race card. Intifada, go back to the ovens.
No,
That's not
Nobody's
fear mongering.
denying that that's anti-Semitic.
No, but you're
Nobody here
denying
is
that it was said. You're saying that it's
I'm
fear
not
mongering.
denying that it wasn't said. I'm just saying. I'm not denying
She's
that
saying
wasn't said or that it was. I don't
Anti-Zionism
know.
is racism, is fear-mongering.
Exactly.
It's calling somebody who disagrees with you about a highly political issue a racist, undermines their entire argument,
But that's
and it
not,
kind of stops
But
it.
that's not what
Thank
I'm
you.
saying, and that's what you're accusing me of doing.
Well, that's
which is
how
not
it
what I'm
feels
saying.
like, because
But
if you
you're-
come after, we've had many conversations about this, Elliot, and you come and you attack Amara. That
No,
way,
no.
and you can't have a
You're not going
conversation
to
about
accuse me of
something.
things here. You're not going to accuse me of things that I didn't do, because
Have you
Is
not
you're
said that-
anti-Semitism racism?
what?
Is anti-Semitism racism?
Yes,
Is being an anti-Zionist anti-Semitic?
yes.
So
That's
if you're
what
an
you
anti-Zionist,
said.
you're racist, is what you're just saying. And
What?
if you're an anti-Zionist, if you don't believe in Zionism, if you disagree with that concept, you're anti-Semitic, which is racism against Jewish people.
Yeah.
So if you don't agree, if I don't agree with you politically on that issue, I'm a racist, is what you're saying. And that's not, like, that doesn't
I don't
help
think you're a
anything.
racist person, but I think that the idea is
Well, if you call me
racist.
anti-Semitic, that's calling me a racist.
Elliot,
I think that
where-
the idea is racist
So
and
I hold
anti-Semitic.
racist
Elliot.
ideas. I
where
don't.
I stand in that
I don't.
position, pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, it is such
But-
a vast and long issue that has been going on for however many hundreds of years. It's so hard to just, especially, I mean, I am not a Jewish person, so I don't feel as personally connected
Mm-hmm.
to it. And I am not as educated as you may be. But I'm not going to take a stance that is one way or the other, and I shouldn't feel forced into a stance because if I don't agree with one stance, then I'm considered racist in the other. I don't have a formulated opinion on the thing. I
But
think
you
that there's
do.
issues on I think that there are issues on both sides, and the violence that comes on both sides is incredibly wrong. And attacking
Okay.
individuals for being at certain and putting people in camps because they're in a certain area.
Hold on.
I
Now
think
you're
that
going
is
into
wrong.
a completely different issue. Now you've just admitted that you've taken a side because you've.
I am not taking a side.
If you're gonna cite somebody's war
think that
crimes,
both sides are
but you're not
wrong.
talking
Or
about both
there's
This
sides.
is the issue with
Hold on,
your
hold on,
approach to the
hold
issue.
on.
If she doesn't agree with you, you're
But that's
attacking her
not.
character.
But that's not what I'm talking. First of all, I've never attacked her character.
Calling somebody racist or saying they hold
I
racist
never-
ideas is an attack on their character.
Okay, the idea is racist. I think the idea is racist. If
You think that. It's
I
not
think-
fact. You can think something's
So
racist, that doesn't mean it is.
I believe it to be fact based on a lot of research I've done. But the point that I'm making is it's not about having an opinion. It's people are allowed to protest. That's not what I'm against. I'm against violence and I'm against the intimidation of Jewish students, which nobody really
Nobody should
takes
be
Can I
for
ask a
seriously.
that.
question?
Nobody should be for that.
I agree. You said you're not against protest, but you're not for racism. So you don't believe that people can hold an opinion that's not Zionist without holding racist opinions. So you believe that a protest against Israel, like the existence of it, Zionism, is a protest based in racist ideas, and you're not against that?
No,
Elliot,
I
you have
believe-
to admit
but
that it's a complex thing. It's
it's
that
a
whole
complex thing, but
conflict
when
is
you talk
very
about,
Could you answer
complex.
but
my
when you
question?
talk about, I answered it. But when you talk about the fact that this issue has been going on for so many years, Israel is only 70 years old, so the state is only 70 years old. That's not what I'm
But
talking
the
about right
conflict
now.
is not 70 years old.
No, the conflict is not 70 years old, and nobody said it was black and white. But what I'm really feeling right now is that all I'm trying to say is that anti-Semitism is wrong, and it happened on a university campus, and it just kind of feels like that's not the biggest
What was-
issue
Well,
to deal with.
if that phrase was said about the ovens, I don't think we.
Nobody's saying that
we
that's
also-
right.
that's
Everybody,
disgusting.
it's
Wrong.
absolutely disgusting, and it's pure anti-Semitism. I'm not saying that it was said. I don't know if it was said or if it wasn't said. Regardless, even if it's being said that it has been said, that statement should never be in formulation anywhere in the media because it is pure racism. It's pure anti-Semitism. Nobody is denying that. The only conversation that we're having here is to attack somebody's character because you imply that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism has been established as racism. That is the wrong way to go around having an argument.
But if it's somebody's opinion, if it's according to a lot of sources fact, we're going to have an entire episode on this, right? That's not what we're talking about right now. I'm bringing up the fact that Jewish students don't feel safe on campus, and I think that's a problem.
So
Of course,
I
it's
mean,
a problem. Anybody that doesn't feel safe in any area is a
Is a
problem,
problem.
But
regardless
it's not
of
being
religion,
addressed.
race, sex,
It's
whatever.
not being addressed.
I mean,
Well,
didn't you
didn't
just
Doug
say
Ford
that Doug
and
Ford, John Tory, and
Torrance-
Justin
Yes,
Trudeau said
finally, but York
Sounds like being
University is
addressed
not
by the
addressing it.
Leader of our country. I
think
feel like that's a lot.
There
of
might be some
addressing.
issues or maybe some biases within the York University administration. I'm not very familiar with it, but I think the greater discussion here is that there's a lot of violence on campuses. regardless of the position of the speakers or the counter protesters. And I think people have the right to protest. They can be as vile as they want. But physical intimidation and physical violence are wrong. I remember a most recent video of, I think it was an Ann Coulter speech. I think you've seen that.
I've seen that.
Woman was basically mobbed, like separated by herself, and there was like 30 people around her yelling at her, intimidating her. They stole her ticket to entry into the event. So I think there needs to be an understanding that that's wrong, no matter who the party involved is, left wing, right wing, pro whatever, anti whatever, it doesn't matter.
Everybody has the right to protest, and
Nobody's disagreeing with that.
Everybody has the right to peaceful protest.
Right.
The issue in this area here, on both sides, like
Is that it
regardless
got
who
violent?
initiated or who didn't, obviously the person that initiated, they're at more of a fault legally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is denying that that's wrong. People got injured. People feel scared. People feel intimidated. If you have any stance and you're holding any stance, you can look at it for any type of extremist organization, extreme feminists that say all men are horrible, or extreme religious individuals who will kill because if you don't believe in if you don't take their stance on religion. Anybody that is extremist, in this case especially, they're at a fault and they are wrong. Nobody should feel intimidated to go to another stance. If there's gonna be protest, then it has to be peaceful. If there's gonna be protests like this, then yeah, York is at. I'm not disagreeing that York is at fault. That they should put more protection in for individuals who are protesting for pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, whatever. You shouldn't just have throw a protest and not have any security or not have any implementation put in place. So especially when you have such an issue that is so vast and so wild and so controversial. Nobody's denying that. The statements that were said, nobody is denying that they were anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitic. If anybody argues that that whole statement, I don't even want to say it, is not anti-Semitic, then that's racist that you're talking to.
The group that said it denies it's anti-Semitic.
Well, again,
But
I've read
wrong.
multiple accounts that have said that nobody heard that.
But
So
now you're
it's not
denying the fact that it exists, that the
I'm not
statement was said.
Well, you weren't there. You don't know for a fact it exists. I've read multiple
Nobody-
accounts
I
that say
have
that it didn't
people
say.
that were there that night that have told me.
And I've read accounts of people who say they were there as well that say they didn't hear that.
Okay, I have people who directly told me. That's what I'm saying. And the whole purpose of this is that Jewish students don't feel safe on campus. And this is the first time that it was really addressed in the media, but it's the norm. Jewish students are very uncomfortable on campuses. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. And I think
nobody's
that,
denying that that's wrong.
but I think that that idea of Jewish students being safe on campus should be supported, and not turn into a debate, not a debate, but a huge.
That's not what we're debating here, though, Elliot.
You didn't say Jewish students don't feel safe on campus, and
Yeah.
you were like, they shouldn't. Like, that's not what
Nobody
happened.
is debating that subject whatsoever. Every Jewish individual should feel safe on
Every
campus.
individual should feel safe on campus.
Any individual of any minority or anybody ever.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a minority and you're a white guy, you should feel safe going to school.
But Jews don't, and that's the problem.
Of course,
And
that's a
not-
problem, and that's
not
a
being
problem that
addressed.
we have to address. And nobody's denying that it shouldn't be, Elliot.
A lot of people are not addressing it. That's what I'm saying.
You're
this
saying
is the first
that we're
time.
denying that shouldn't be.
No, I didn't say that.
Who's not addressing it? York?
The general media. The general
But
media.
But they
been news
are.
articles. There's tons of news articles on this. Like you said, the mayor of our city, the premier of our province, and the leader of our country
Yes,
have all
but what I'm
acknowledged
saying
it. So
is
how
that
it not
this
being
is a
addressed?
norm. This is a norm for Jews to not feel safe on campus, and this is the
So
first time it's
how-
being addressed. But
So then-
it
so then
needs
what
to
do
be
we do?
addressed.
Yeah, what else do you
it
want?
needs to be addressed on a larger scale.
So
Then the
what do we
prime
do?
minister? It needs to be addressed on a larger scale than the prime
These
minister.
protests, these violent protests should not happen. Peaceful protesting is fine, but
Well,
it
if
wasn't
they-
peaceful.
Well, if they were violent, they broke the law, right? And I mean, that's
yeah,
already
but nothing's
illegal.
happening about that.
Well, I read that
But-
the Toronto
but they-
police are investigating to see whether or not hate crimes occurred, and if they do,
A
they
lot
will.
of investigations happen and nothing comes out of
You
it.
need to investigate
so,
before
Elliot,
you arrest people.
What should be the course of action then?
There needs to be more education. There needs to be more protection for minorities who feel unsafe, in this case, Jewish students. And again, violent protests should not be allowed because the
Nope,
police stood by.
There aren't
The thing
not
is,
allowed.
They're not
They're
allowed.
illegal.
They didn't go into protest with the intention of, we're going to protest violently.
They did.
How do you know that?
The thing, if somebody was allowed, because they obviously had to have permission to be there by York. They
To be
didn't.
peaceful.
Oh, exactly. That is what I'm saying. So they didn't go to York. Didn't say okay. They didn't go to They didn't go to York and saying we're going to have a really violent protest.
Nobody's going to say that.
But how do you know they
How-
planned the violence? Like, how do you know they planned for it to be violent? It was Students
Because
Against
in the-
Israeli Apartheid, I believe was the
Yes,
tag
that's
of
the
it.
group.
Yeah, so how do you know they plan to be violent?
Because in their description, they talked about that they're going to use whatever force necessary to.
In their like
um,
description
to-
of their like Facebook group or something?
That's what I read, and that's what I was told. But the point is, it was violent, and that shouldn't happen. And I think
Nobody
that,
knows that
Nobody
should
thinks
happen.
it should.
Wait, did someone get hit? Punched?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's wrong.
It's
I-
assault.
I don't
That
think.
is assault, and that should
It's
be
illegal.
penalized.
That's all I'm
Hugely.
trying
It's
to say.
illegal.
I think
All
people-
I'm trying to
Nobody
say.
is denying that,
People should
though,
be able
Elliot.
to yell whatever vile things they want. I might differ from Amara and Jessica on that, but physical violence is unacceptable.
I mean, I don't know how much speech should be governed, so I would say like
Hate
I
speech,
would agree
is
with
covered.
that.
That's a
Hate
whole-
speech is covered. It is
yeah, I
protected,
know,
so
but
you're
I
allowed
would
to
agree
say
with
what
you saying that
want.
once it gets to physical violence, that's too far.
Once
Yeah.
once speech incites violence, it's hate speech, and that's what it was. But
Well,
No,
Speech
the
that already
physical
in-
act of violence is what incites the violence. I can say how.
but you can't go
say
into
how,
hate speech. But it's also like you can
No,
also be
hate
charged if
speech
you
is-
run into somewhere and say the building is
well,
burning.
I
It's
just
the
wanna make
same.
it- there's a
That's not
distinction.
hate speech.
There's a distinction between.
Yeah, that's just restrictions on
speech-
free speech.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between speech that incites violence than hate speech, because you can say hate speech that doesn't incite violence.
Because that brings into the whole test of like would a reasonable person be able to refrain long enough if somebody was saying these these atrocious things towards them for such an elongated period of time. That's when the first act of violence, though, the first act of assault and battery, that's when it switches to violence. The hate speech and everything that they were saying is constitutionally protected. That's the thing. So when it comes, if like Samuel could be saying a million things that are really pissing me off and are really everything anti who I am as a person, and he could say it and he could say it and he can say it and he can say it, and then once I
Okay.
strike him, it's
Okay.
not that it would be me on
Okay.
me that I strike
We're
him and I insult and you
we're
know,
gonna move on
brought in
now
the
to our main
assault.
topic, but the overarching point is that it concerns me that Jewish students don't feel safe on campus, and more needs to be done about it. But
And everybody
that's-
agrees. I think
I
everybody
don't
should
think
agree on that statement.
maybe in here everybody agrees, but in general in society, I don't see that sentiment. So we're gonna move on to our main topic now, which is immigration. Immigration is the international movement of people to a destination country of which they are not natives or where they do not possess citizenship in order to settle or reside there, especially as permanent residents or naturalized citizens, or to take up employment as a migrant worker or temporarily as a foreign worker. Like myself, many students at Ryerson have parents who are immigrants. Multiculturalism and diversity are considered to be one of Canada's biggest strengths, and as a result, Canada sees a large number of immigrants every year. But is it too many? Do we need to slow down? On today's show, we talk about our current immigration system and what changes, if need be, should be made. As a reminder, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed to have your thoughts read live on air. We're going to start with our Facebook poll, where we asked if you were the children of immigrant parents. And the results were, Sam?
Yep, I'm bringing it up right now. Oh God, can you believe that I closed it like 2 minutes ago?
Unbelievable. Well, what are the results? Are they up?
Yes.
And how many people voted? How many people voted?
It's loading. Okay.
Oh, what?
How many people voted?
Okay, so 91 people voted. 68% said they were immigrants, or the children of immigrants,
Right.
and 32% said, no, I am not. With
Okay.
91 votes.
91 votes. That's a good turnout. Thank you to everybody that voted. What about you guys? Are you the children of immigrants, Amara?
My father was born here in Toronto, and my mom immigrated with her family when she was 4 years old.
And Sam?
My family immigrated here when I was 4 years old.
Nice. And Jessica?
I'm second generation.
Second generation. So, why do people choose Canada? Why did your parents choose Canada?
So my grandparents chose Canada, and as far as I know, I think it was, I might be wrong, but maybe easier to come here from Jamaica. That was another Commonwealth country, which is where they immigrated from. And a lot of people hear that Canada has, a higher quality of life and a lot of opportunities, especially for their children. So I assume that's why they picked Canada, and I'm pretty sure it's easier to immigrate here than the States.
Okay. Sam?
My father got a job offer.
Nice.
And then he liked the country. He knew he wanted to settle. My mother's American. He didn't want to go to the U.S. For multiple reasons. And then they decided on Canada after visiting here briefly.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it, well, my parents also came because, so my dad came because he was getting out of the Soviet Union because of anti-Semitism, and he went through Italy and came here. My mom came because she already had family here. But do you find that it's very easy or very difficult to immigrate to Canada?
I'm not sure of the steps that you need to take to immigrate here, but as far as I know, it's not too difficult.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of facts. So the Trudeau government had a requirement when they entered office that anyone that was a skilled immigrant or going under the programs that receive the most amount of immigrants, they had to have a job offer before they enter the country. So you would apply internationally, and then once you receive the job offer, you present that to the government, and they would give you some sort of temporary work visa. That was a system my father entered in. But I think since 2016, they changed the rules where you could enter the country without an explicit job offer, as long as they deemed it was a industry or workplace that was in demand. So in that system, in 2015 they allowed 1.2. Sorry, Trudeau entered government in 2015. So I guess they reversed it in 2015. So they let in 1.2 million people under it's called multiple entry visas. This is a 21% increase from 2014. And these are 10-year visas that are for temporary work. And they're not counted towards the immigration numbers that are officially published by the government and ones that we know. Like, I think 250,000 is the number that is more widely understood. So besides that, there's a point system where your education, the field you're applying for, your education, your age, I believe, is all factored in, and you get more points and you're compared to other individuals. But what's interesting is, of those 1.2 million people I mentioned previously, 82% of them were accepted. So it was 1.4 something, and then 1.2 were accepted. So to round it back up, not too difficult to enter Canada if you want.
Now, do you think that we should limit the amount of people that we're accepting, or should we have a close to open border policy?
We should dramatically limit the amount of people we're accepting.
Jessica?
Outside of key industries.
I disagree. I think we are a really prosperous and vast country, and the system that they have put in place now and how it's working now, I mean, I don't think that we should be denying anybody entry if, they come with their valid reason, like if they have a work offer or, they're coming for a certain industry, and how the whole system works now. I don't see an issue with it, especially, our refugee program, which I think is pretty well equipped, and it does help a lot of individuals. So no, I mean, we have a lot of resource here, we have a lot of space here, and we're an incredibly lucky country here with our healthcare and with the way things are. So I don't think that we should deny our borders to other individuals who want to come here for whatever reason. They want a new life, they want a better life, and I think that's why a lot of our parents or grandparents came to this country originally, was for a better life. And no, I don't think we should be denying that to anybody else.
Well, sure, the refugee numbers are a minutia compared to the total amount of legal immigrants we accept every year. I think it's just a couple thousand, maybe close to 50,000, 40,000 a year, I believe. At least since the Syrian civil war. But to say that people have a right to come here, or any type of
situation.
Just because they want a better life. I completely disagree with that axiom, because if you really want to, I would describe myself as a nationalist, and I believe that if immigration harms Canadians in their wages, their accessibility to public services like our healthcare system, which is underfunded and bloated, then no, we should limit the amount of immigration, and we can talk about later in the show why those factors are true.
I agree with that, absolutely. I think immigration should definitely be suited to what Canada as a country needs at the time. And yeah, I think we should only allow people in with industries that we need, workers in. And I don't think that we should have anywhere close to open borders at all.
That's kind of what we have now. We don't have an open border
No,
policy right
I was
now.
just answering.
Well,
Oh,
it depends. If you cross over Roxham Road, you have a very high chance that you'll just get accepted.
Yeah. Well, that goes to our topic of illegal immigration, which we're going to get to in a second. But let's go back. Let's continue on this subject of legal immigration for economic purposes. So you think that we need to limit the amount of people, but say somebody is coming to or wants to immigrate to Canada, and they're very intelligent and they have skills that are needed in Canada, you would deny them the right to come?
Well, I think I have these numbers right here from the immigration department. I think there's kind of a myth around the fact that the majority of people we let into the country legally are of these high-skilled, high-demand occupations. Like I said, the Trudeau government reversed the policy where you were required to have a job offer before entering the country. So to say that these people are all coming in to fill jobs, if that were the case, then why rescind that policy? But I have here, it's the top 10 invited, this is directly from the government website, top 10 invited occupations, and this is by occupation in 2016, January. And the top 3 are food service supervisors, cooks, and information systems analysts and consultants. So that's general IT work.
That's what Canada's looking for.
Those are the top 3. Mm-hmm. And those are all under 10% because obviously there's a lot of possibilities you could have. But to say that they're all high skilled, and these are all people coming in with masters and PhD, I think is just a common myth.
So what about special skilled workers? Like, for example, I want to talk to you about more cross-border, so between Canada and U.S., more freedom to immigrate. Do you feel that that it should be an easier process just between those two countries to immigrate?
Well, I think with our current immigration system, like the point system, you're given more weight depending on like your primary language, I believe. Like if your mother tongue is either French or English, you're given more points. So I think that's the only thing that should matter. Specifically between U.S. and Canada, I don't think there should be any preference unless maybe you're better financially stable if you're coming from the U.S. maybe than another country. But then that would just play into the point system. So I don't think there should be an exception.
Jessica?
But like having an open border between Canada and the U.S., I mean, I don't know. I think there's so many bigger issues at hand if that were to be a thing. And the state's immigration policy is just totally out of line with what our immigration policies are here. So no, I don't think it would work even if it was for two, kind of, I mean, we're alliances. And
friends.
we're, for the most part. So, and especially as long as Trump is there, I don't think that would ever work. Nor do I really think that it should. I still do believe that Canada and U.S. should be separate. All I'm saying is that like individuals should feel free to come here with the process that we have implemented now, which I don't really see any issue with. And I think that would work. I'm not just saying that that's for only for Canada. Open immigration should be for other places. I don't think that should be necessarily true. I think you need to have some form of policy put in place, obviously, and that's just for the protection of all individual, including the immigrants coming into the country. So I believe that the system that we have in Canada right now is pretty solid. But no, like an open immigration between Canada and the U.S. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that we're too different in the way that we have worldviews. As capitalist and Western as Canada is, we're nowhere near that level with the United States, which I think would also be a big area of playing into that whole account as well. And then the idea of healthcare, I think that we would be affected greatly. And I just I think countries do have to have some form of autonomy. That's not necessarily nationalist. I just think that that's how our fair trade and world trade works. And I think if we were to make it just open border, you would have bigger issues down the line. That's why as I am so pro immigration, and I believe that we should have immigration in any country. And we just need a little bit of a structured solution for how individuals are coming in and out of countries, and that's why I like the policy that we have put in place in Canada.
Well, let's go back to illegal immigration. So, Sam, you mentioned that a lot of people are crossing at Roxham Road. That's in Quebec, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So people are crossing that road from the States going into Canada. And Canada's accepting them. Do you believe that we should be accepting them, or should we be sending them back to the States?
Well, I just want to say that illegal immigration, especially in the Canadian context, I believe is a red herring, and that plays more into the part of, the concern in the U.S., the discussion in the U.S. is illegal immigration, but obviously because they have a border with Mexico, that's more of a discussion. So I think that idea of illegal immigration being a giant problem is just reflected into the Canadian discussion, and we find this one road or one area where there's illegal immigration. But I think it's largely a red herring. But we have an agreement with the U.S. called the Third Safe Country Agreement, and that says that any refugee entering from Canada and then going into the U.S. and vice versa is not qualified as a refugee, because if they were a true refugee, then I believe we have it with Mexico too, that they should have been safe or qualified as safe upon entering the first country they entered. So if they say, I believe the ones in Roxham Road, or majority of them are coming from Haiti, or at least the first wave was, that's because their immigration status as a refugee was going to expire after the Haiti earthquake. And to say that they should be granted status in Canada after coming from the U.S. would be the diplomatic equivalent of Canada saying, well, we don't recognize the United States as a safe country anymore, which I think is ridiculous.
Well, now, what were you going to say, Jessica?
I mean, if you're comparing Canada to the States for safeness, United States is so far behind.
Yeah, but if you're a refugee, somebody who's like fleeing death, basically,
No,
like,
I get
you should have
that
stayed. There's no reason to
I
come
get
here
that
from the States
argument,
as a
but if you
refugee.
are, let's say, especially with all the ICE raids and in Mexico right now, like those immigrants, whether illegal or legal, that are crossing the border from Mexico into the States, they are not safe in the United States.
Well, they're committing a crime, right? Because ICE doesn't target legal immigrants, and that's the whole point of border enforcement. Is they're targeting.
So the ways that they're coming for illegal immigration, doing anything illegal, obviously not okay.
Okay, good. So
but
then it doesn't matter if they're safe or not because they've committed a crime.
I think that argument is dumb too, because
By crossing a border illegally?
Well, no, I think your argument of because they've done something illegal, they don't have rights and they shouldn't be protected. The reason that they're crossing illegally, or they're coming illegally, or they're doing everything that they're doing is they're fleeing from impoverished areas, they're fleeing from gang violence, and they're fleeing from big issues.
Sure,
so they're not just coming for the fun of crossing.
Well, they can apply as a refugee then.
You realize the process of becoming a refugee in the United States is like next to impossible. So it's either, you die in the country that you have, go through an impossible process with no possibility of chance, or you take the risk and you come over illegally. If you are in that position where you are a parent and you have a child and you want that best for the child and you don't want that child to die, you're going to make that decision, and all the time it's going to be the illegal decision. It comes down to whole morality and philosophy arguments where it's like, oh, would you steal bread to feed your family?
No, I think the only discussion that needs to be had is about law and order, and
that's a really black and white way to have the discussion. Illegal immigration, I'm not saying is a problem. I'm not saying isn't a problem. I'm saying that there's reasons for those immigrants to come illegally. And if they're coming into a country and then they're just detained how they are detained in really inhumane conditions and traumatic conditions for either party, for both the parents and the child, that is not a way to handle a situation, and that's not a way to handle something that you're having an issue with.
I think humanely, we can acknowledge, I don't think people are illegally immigrating to the States from South American countries because, like you said, for the fun of it. There are, horrible conditions in those countries, but I also think we have to look at the countries that they're fleeing to, their capacity to, handle all of these refugees or illegal immigrants. I don't think that we can let compassion undermine doing things that are in especially Canada's best interests for Canada and Canadians.
I think I want to steer away from the discussion about America because I think there's a tendency to focus on it because it's interesting and it's in the media so often. But just one last thing, this level of illegal immigration, if you want to talk about the depravity of the circumstances, would disappear overnight if you got serious about enforcement and properly.
It disappear overnight.
Yeah, if you said you came here, there was no chance of amnesty, you couldn't get a job, you were not eligible for social benefits, people would not come because they know they would be deported immediately and there'd be no, leniency. We have to talk about big business interests lobbying for amnesty, or not specifically amnesty, softer rules on illegal immigration, and the lack of enforcement. I know I just saw you bringing up the before the show started about an ICE raid at a giant, I believe it was a meat processing plant. Am I correct? Those people shouldn't be here, but that company should be fined out the ass for hiring illegal workers. And once you start doing that, those companies aren't going to want to, they'll be more strict in the type of labor they employ. And if you get rid of that type of cheap labor where they're not even properly paid correctly, people aren't going to come because they won't get a job, they won't get social benefits, like I said.
Okay, so you put in this whole implementation, and this is how you handle the situation. So how you don't think that that's not a human rights crisis at all? That there's individuals out in countries where they're fearing for their lives on a day-to-day basis?
Yes,
you don't think as Western countries we should do something about that?
And we do have a system like that, and it's called a refugee status. And if you apply and you prove to the immigration officer or the department that you're at risk, then the U.S. admits refugees, and so does Canada. That's
not what I'm saying.
But you said, we have a humanitarian obligation.
Yeah, so we should be doing things as a universe, as a global country. We should be doing things to help with the systems that are in operation within those impoverished areas. We should put in processes that will make individuals want to stay, let's say in Mexico, for an example, and not fear that they're going to be murdered or be part of gang raids or anything like that.
Sure, and
if this is your big process, if this is the process that we're going to cut away all immigration and all illegal immigration and make it impossible
I would like to
for
reduce
individuals.
Crime. I would like to reduce illegal immigration.
Okay, I'm just what? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if that is your big thing. And I don't, honestly, if you want to call it illegal immigration, it's illegal, but there's obviously a big reason behind it. Nobody's just coming here for the fun of it. So to call it a crime and to say that there's no, fundamental reason behind it and to just blanket statement as these are all criminals, I think that's disrespectful to the individuals that are coming.
Sure, but
there's bigger issues at hand than what you know and what you're never going to have to deal with.
Sure,
if I could just interrupt for 1 second. I have a Facebook comment to read from Marshall.
Okay,
he says,
please.
I would say that everybody deserves to be safe, but laws are designed to keep people safe, and by breaking them, you're putting yourself in danger. It's like when you climb on something that says, do not climb. And I would agree with that. If I know this is a further question, so if we're going to talk about the way that illegal immigrants have been treated with detention centers and ICE and stuff like that, I think that's a different conversation. I don't think that that's humane or the best way to handle it. But I do think that if you're breaking the law, laws are in place to keep everybody safe.
Americans safe.
Well, you're right. Americans safe. And I don't think that you have any sort of permission to break the law in a country and then kind of like advocate for, I guess, staying in that country or just being allowed to break the law. Like you can't do that. It's the law.
And I think if we were to implement, or if Americans were to implement the stronger rules, like I mentioned, and the legitimate refugees or people that were at risk would apply for refugee status.
Then they need to up the refugee status then, because what it is now is too minimal. If that's
so you want to take in more refugees?
Yeah.
Well, 40,000, 50,000 refugees is quite a big
Canada
number.
has a very, not very small, but like a tenth of the state's population. Like how many refugees can we sustain?
We also take, I think, the most refugees per capita, don't we?
Yeah.
We take the most amount of legal immigration, which I want to go back to, but just to round off the illegal immigration in the U.S., I think if you implemented these strong laws and then the people that were legitimately refugees applied through refugee status, the program, whatever they have, you would see a lot of these economic migrants, which I believe a majority of them are, that are illegally crossing the border, would not. And they know because if they applied through refugee status, they wouldn't get it because they're not legitimate refugees. They're economic migrants.
To say that it's a majority without the fact, I think you're a little out of line.
Sam?
I don't believe. I believe a lot of immigration to the U.S. is economic.
You believe it? Is it true?
Yeah, I could look it up. I believe I've seen that online before.
What's your source?
What's your source for everything?
I come from the government of Canada website. I believe you showed me some of your sources before.
You proved to me that they're majority refugee. Where's your
Fine.
source?
Then I'll get back to you.
Okay, well I'll get back.
Give me your source.
I know you'll give me your source.
If it's from
I
some
can find it. I
right-wing
know I've seen it
Republican horrible website, then
God.
I'm coming for you.
Okay, I'll look it up. I'll give it to you after
Thank
the show.
you.
So going back to economic immigrants, or you know what? Let's stick to refugees. That's a big
Yay.
subject.
No, it's a red herring. Can we
Refugees.
talk about legal immigration in Canada?
Legal?
Yeah.
I know you want to just cut it. You just want to close the borders, don't you?
I don't want to close the borders, but I'd like to cut it.
Samuel, how many citizenships do you have?
Oh,
I have a collection.
And so isn't that a little bit hypocritical?
No, I don't believe so.
well, you're
How?
an immigrant yourself, right?
I didn't choose these.
No, but you are an immigrant. You weren't born here.
Yeah.
So you are an immigrant. And you have
Yeah.
American citizenship. I don't want
Yes.
to put you on blast, but
Yeah, I do.
So
I think I've told everyone that.
Yeah, no, I know. So like how is it okay for you?
Because I'm a
Even though you
Canadian.
didn't choose it, there's other children
His
out there that
father
aren't
is
choosing it. That aren't
highly
choosing
skilled.
it.
I know, but I'm a Canadian, so I think I have a right to say what
But
type of
you're-
people I would like in the country.
Yeah, but you're not.
Are you making a distinction between old stock Canadians
Oh,
and
No,
immigrants?
I'm not.
Old
I'm saying
stock
I'm saying with
Canadians.
you,
Nice.
with you personally. You're saying
Yeah.
that you want to close all borders, no immigration, nothing.
No, I didn't say no
Wouldn't that-
immigration. I'd like to severely reduce it.
But wouldn't that have affected you? Don't you see any personal connection to this?
Can
I
I
know
ask a
your
question?
situation might be similar to another situation out there for another child.
Sure, but I'm not that
But
child. I
Samuel,
don't think we can make. I don't think we
personal
have. Yeah.
connections. But
Yeah.
also, I think if we were going off of your system, like your dad got a job offer,
Yeah.
he would qualify for the highly skilled immigrants that you're looking for, wouldn't
Yeah.
he?
So we only should accept highly qualified immigrants? Is
I
that,
think
like-
so. I think we should accept people that are going to positively contribute to our economy.
Yeah.
You
Canada
can,
doesn't have that.
you can have low skilled immigrants as well, and you could still positively affect the economy.
Okay, maybe our economy and just I don't know. I think high
I don't think a
immigrants
country is an economic zone, and to base immigration policies specifically on whether it economically benefits us, I believe is short-sighted and ignores historical precedent.
What's the historical precedent?
That if you allow a lot of people that have different values and identities come into a country all at once, and you make no
God.
So
we all
you
have
make
to
no
have the same identity.
No, you don't make any policy to aim to assimilate them, which isn't the official policy of
Why should
Canada.
we all assimilate? Why should we all be the same? Why should we all be a
Because
black
I don't think
we're
we
all
should-
living,
of
we're all
things?
agreeing to live in a country and obey the same laws, the same customs to a certain degree, the same
You
mannerisms.
can do all that by having your own individuality and
I don't
with having
think
your
that
own
you
religion
should-
and having your own identity.
I don't think that we all have to have the same. I mean, there's no one singular Canadian identity. There's a multiple, like even old stock Canadian identities that
That's
exist
true.
in the country. So I don't think we all have to have the same identity. But I definitely think that you should, speak English or French. And I've heard people ask, like saying, or I don't know if we do, but having a values test for immigrants. I think that would be absolutely all right. I think that we should make sure that people who are coming into Canada will mesh with our values and our culture here. I don't think everyone has to be the same or the same religion or the same culture, but I definitely think that they should accept Canadian culture and participate in it.
So I want to.
No, I want to go to something that you said
Yeah.
on a couple weeks ago, but I think last month, on one of our first shows, you called multiculturalism a cult.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you want to just elaborate on what you mean by that? 'Cause
Sure.
Just
So
since we're
I-
talking about it?
Yeah, I believe it's cult-like in the sense that you can't question its authority or its pervasiveness in Canadian culture, whether that's hiring practices, the type of immigrants we let into the country, or policies on university campuses, etc. And that is kind of a good segue. I read a study, it was an article actually at the National Post. This isn't some fringe website, although maybe some people disagree. About 32% of Canadians think current immigration levels of 260,000 are too high. And I don't think that's a sizable part of
It's like a third.
the country. And I believe if you told them that, hey, we're also letting in 1.2 million people in 2015 on 10-year work visas, maybe their opinion might also change. This is an interesting quote about the level of which immigration really isn't discussed, and Canadians really haven't had a say in it. This is from the immigration, a quote that the National Post obtained from the Canadian Immigration Department in 2016. Engagement with the Canadian public is necessary. However, any high-profile debate will have to be carefully managed. Isn't that interesting? I don't think any other kind of policy or any kind of policy as important as immigration is talked about in those terms.
I think
it has to
that
be
the-
managed by the government. Even if a sizable portion of the Canadian public disagrees with it, that's very cult-like, wouldn't you say?
I don't think that any debate should be managed by the government. I think that's, censorship. I don't think that should happen. But I think that immigration also has the capacity to be a lot more explosive of an argument than other things. Xenophobia and things like that exist. So I think that
yeah.
immigration has, just that debate has the capacity to maybe go to a further level in other debates, and maybe that's why they decided to censor it. And just talking about like multiculturalism, I think I think we have to understand where things like hiring practices, like affirmative action or equal opportunity employers come from. I don't think they come out of a malicious place, but I don't necessarily think that they're implemented correctly. So I don't think we should, like, racism exists, and I don't think that
wrong.
of course, I don't think you think it's right.
Okay.
I think we should acknowledge that, and I think that goes with the multiculturalism conversation, but I think we also need to, make a distinction between culture and race, because I think you can be Canadian and be of various races. Like, I don't think Canadians all
Absolutely.
have to be
Everyone here
one
that
race.
is of a different race that's in Canada is a Canadian in my eyes. But what I want to do is implement policies that benefit Canadians, regardless of race.
I agree.
And you said about culture, and that's an interesting discussion, especially now with Quebec and their separatist or autonomous parties that are in power. You can see, especially in Canada, there's a historical issue, if you'd like to call that. I'd maybe say a debate or a eternal conflict between their Anglo and the Quebecer and the Quebecois. But we see this historical division between Anglo and French Canada. Mm-hmm. Do we want to have that multiply like heads of a hydra?
I don't think that necessarily comes from just the fact that they speak different languages. Like, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of history and conflict.
Yeah, it's primarily, I'm sure they would say, is religion.
Yes.
And between Catholic and Protestant.
Yes.
And language.
But don't you think that there's a lot of resentment in French Canada towards English Canada because the way they've been treated?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that might not that might not be true for newer immigrants of different cultures.
Yeah, there might be some resentment, but you have to understand that they also have a desire, and I think rightly so, to have their own society. They even, Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, I believe that's the provincial, the federal party.
The federal.
Yeah, he said that Canada is Quebec
nation.
is a nation inside Canada.
Yeah.
So to say that we need to allow all these people into the country and they shouldn't assimilate to some greater culture or greater set of values, I believe we're just extrapolating on that historical precedent of conflict between Anglo and
do you think that
French Canada. You're just going to have more interest groups that are vying for their own way of life to be represented in the country.
Do you think that French Canadians have a legitimate
Grievance?
have legitimacy saying
Absolutely.
they want their nation? So
Yeah.
I would agree, but I don't think that newer immigrant populations from different cultures have that legitimacy. So I don't think that would necessarily cause the same. I mean, maybe they think they will, and I'm sure that's where the issue would come in.
Yeah.
But I think, going back to what I said, I think that people should definitely, like, immigrants should accept Canadian values. So if you're going to come to Canada and advocate for living your own way of life, especially if it's drastically different from ours, I don't think that should be...
Sure. And
what do you consider a Canadian value?
Well, I mean, probably like separation of church and state. Religion is not a very public thing here in terms of like the government.
Equality under the law.
Relations
between men and women.
Things like that. I completely think that if you're not going to accept that that's the way it is in Canada,
you can't beat your wife,
here.
is what I meant.
Okay, that's what I was like. What do you mean?
Well, I got that.
Okay.
I thought
everyone looked at me when I said that.
I
Like,
thought you were
what does it
going
say?
on to like
I
the
don't
whole.
think that that's where you
gay
like. Yeah, if you
marriage
disagree
thing.
with any of those things and Canadian values on them, then you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't immigrate here, and you should absolutely not be able to advocate for ways of life that are completely opposing to ours.
Sure. And even if we don't say we allow, or there's some kind of values test where we only allow a certain type of people or people that think like us, Canadians.
Okay, that's pretty.
Okay, well, I'm
type
just
of
assuming.
people.
I'm not saying I advocate for that. That's a different
Okay.
discussion. But if you allow such a large volume of people, right, over such a short period of time, and I want to discuss this thing called the Century Initiative, which is a very well-funded organization or political movement that aims to increase the population of Canada to 100 million by the turn of the century. And this isn't like some fringe conspiracy theory. It was in the CBC, I believed, and I believe the National Post were discussing it. Like the current ambassador to China is a member, and there's other influential executives that are involved in the Century Initiative. And it's really interesting. Why would a bunch of rich oligarchs, essentially, rich executives, want to increase the amount of labor in the country? And I'll tell you why. It's because they want to bring down wages and have higher profits. I mean, that's undeniable. If it's just economics 101, if you don't increase efficiency of a market and you increase the supply of labor, wages are stagnant or decrease. So if these advocates for high levels of immigration, just always remember that you're in the pockets of big business and people that would like to stamp on the working class and reduce wages, and that comes with the not being in unions and whatever you might hold dear.
Jessica? No response?
Okay, like
Don't you think it could be more nuanced than that?
yeah.
Sure, it could, but this is just one initiative I'm talking about, the Century Initiative, with 100 million by 2100 turn of the century. That's the biggest increase in Canada's population ever as a proportion. And even current levels are higher now than they were since 1913. And that's when Canada was
it's
expanded.
because we're growing. Not
Sure,
only is
but
it
that was
immigration,
also-
but it's also just pure population.
Sure, but that was also a period of
Like, you can't compare
Canada
us to
reaching
where we
the
were back
coast.
then.
Like Canada was a frontier country at that point, I believe, or at least certain parts of it were underpopulated.
Well, just to wrap things up, in the next 20 years, let's say we have the same immigration policy and nothing changes. What kind of, very quickly, what kind of demographics do we see in Canada? Because the Canadian demographics are changing very quickly.
Are you deeming racial demographics?
Racial, ethnic,
Well, I hope that we're
age.
even more
Well, there's going to be
multicultural than we
less
are
white
now.
people.
Like I don't honestly, who cares? Like if we are like so much more mixed than we are now, so much more multicultural than we are now, if we're have more of one race than another race, like we're Canadians. It doesn't your race, it shouldn't be like how we are defined and how like, oh, Canada, we are so many of whatever. You're Canadian, okay? And it doesn't like we shouldn't be like, oh, we have to, oh, it's wrong if we have so many more of this or so many more of that. So like Canada is a multicultural country. You should feel comfortable with being whatever religion you are here. You should be comfortable and safe with whatever race you are here or whatever, however you identify here. And all of those factors should just make Canada the country that it is, and it shouldn't just be, they shouldn't be singled out, and they shouldn't be just, oh, that's all the whole identity. They should be mixed in how it is now. Like, it doesn't really matter if we are more of one area than we are of another. Like, as long as everybody is respectable to other individuals and everybody feels that they have their own autonomy and they're allowed to live the life the way that they feel in their own skin and in their own individuality and in their own religion, then I think we're in a pretty good space.
Sam?
I think race isn't really important. There's a say, like, you should weigh. Like, racial demographics are interesting, but they aren't my main concern with immigration. My concern is the level and the amount that we take in. And like I said, the highest per capita levels of immigration than any Western country in the world. So, yeah, I think if you want to talk about racial demographics, I believe Canada is set to become majority non-white in 2040. And I believe that's the biggest demographic racial change out of any country in the developed world ever.
How do you feel about that?
What's wrong with that?
I don't know. If you're Israeli, would you be concerned if the level of Israeli Jews decreased in Israel?
That is very different than
That's-
Canadian. I think.
Well, Israel has many different races and ethnic groups.
Yeah.
There's.
But I just think that we let's not get back into that. But I think the
No, I know. I don't want to talk about
no,
that.
but I'm saying there's like. Israel was created to be like a state for Jewish people, correct?
Uh,
Like a
it
Jewish
is
state.
the Jewish state for ethnic reasons, but not religious
yeah,
reasons.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot. I would say a lot more political, like ethnically and racially, than Canada. I think like what does a Canadian look like? Like, I'm Canadian. I'm
Yeah,
not
you are.
white, so I don't know if I would.
I
not gonna
I don't think race makes a Canadian necessarily.
Yeah. So
And I'm not.
How-
I'm only half European, and I would define myself as Canadian.
yeah, I think we'd all define ourselves as
Yeah.
Canadian, and we're all different races.
And I would never
so.
say that someone of a different race is not Canadian. Or
I think we should
or-
focus on culture. I think Canada. A lot of people say Canada doesn't have a culture, and it does feel a lot of times like Canada doesn't
Yeah,
have a
because
culture.
we live in Toronto. And
That's
there's no
true.
consensus of what
But I
Canadian
feel
is. You go to rural Ontario, you go to Quebec. Trust me, you know
Well,
the
I
difference.
think we need to try to maybe enforce or heighten the idea of Canadian culture. I think we should all be Canadian culturally. But I also think in rural Ontario or Quebec, like, I don't know, do you think that those people would have an issue with Canada being 40% white in 20 years? Was it?
Yeah.
Well, if you want... Well,
Because I think
demographics aren't
minorities
set-
are going to
Sure.
feel...
The demographics aren't set to change in those areas. So we can have a discussion about most immigrants. I don't know the exact number.
live
But
in cities.
immigrate to cities.
Yeah.
It's Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal.
Yeah.
Not in that order, but...
I think the rejection of Canadian identity comes from people holding on to their cultural identities, but also comes from a rejection from Canadians of those immigrants as
Sure,
well.
and I think you would agree that Canadian culture is changing at a rapid pace compared to 40, 60 years ago. You
Well,
just
I
look.
wasn't alive then.
I know, but if you look at media back then, this is not a point about the racial characteristics of those people, but they talk differently. They held different values towards many different things. It's a quick cultural change that we're seeing in Canada.
I think the world is changing.
So that you can understand that maybe that's why Canadians feel a little bit lost in their identity, which I think is a terrible thing.
Yeah. Well, that's where we have to end the discussion today. It has been a very, very lively 70th episode of the Raben Report, and it's only going to get livelier. Thank you to everybody that commented on today's show and voted in our poll. Thank you once again to the amazing panelists we have in here, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. It's a pleasure to work with you all. Thank you to Adam, Marshall, Daniel, and Tamar, who were our panelists for the last seasons 1 through 6. And it's just a pleasure doing this show with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of the Raben Report. Same day, same time, same people. Have a great day, everyone.